Hi, this is Chris Enretti, and over the next 10 to 15 minutes I'll be giving a short guide to working with court decisions for students in politics. This video will look at how to identify the parties involved in court decisions and builds upon a previous video where I showed you how to find court decisions in the first place and then cite them. Subsequent videos will go on to look at identifying the winning parties in each case and areas of disagreement between judges. What I'm going to do is take you through a number of different patterns for identifying parties in legal disputes. And the first pattern is where you have what are called appellants and respondents. So when we're thinking about courts at the top of their legal system, like the Supreme Court of the United States or the United Kingdom Supreme Court, they almost always hear appeals rather than hearing cases at first instance. That is to say, they are reacting to a decision of a lower court which one of the parties was not satisfied with and decided to appeal. And so in this first pattern, we have a person or organisation who brings the appeal to the court being described as the appellant or appellant. I personally never know where to place the emphasis on those syllables. And the person or organisation on the other side of that appeal is described as the respondent. So if we take a look at the title page from a recent decision of the UK Supreme Court, we see that this language is right in the first page of the judgment, and the different parties are marked off as either being appellants or respondents. If we're looking instead at the Supreme Court of the United States, we'd see something similar. Here, Donald Trump, in his capacity as president, is listed as the appellant against the state of New York. You'll see that there are two et al. References there, and we'd need to identify the full text of the decision to work out who those other parties involved were. The second pattern doesn't involve appellants and respondents, but rather plaintiffs and respondents. So if we're thinking about a civil case, so anything that's not criminal, that will start with someone bringing a case to court. And the name for that person who brings the case to court can vary depending on the jurisdiction. They'd be most commonly referred to as the plaintiff. Sometimes people would talk about claimants instead. In Scotland, they talk about pursuers. But all of these three terms mean broadly, but not exactly the same thing. So we've got various plaintiffs, claimants and pursuers on one side, and then on the other side we've got either the respondent or the defendant. And so if we take an example from the High Court of England and Wales, a first instance court, in this recent and controversial decision about the use of puberty blockers by the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust, you'll see that in this case they're listed as the defendant and that there are two claimants, Quincy Bell and a claimant only known as Mrs. A. The third pattern is unlike the previous two patterns in that it doesn't involve two parties opposed to one another necessarily. This pattern applies where individuals can bring a petition to court. So this is something which is common in human rights courts and administrative courts. And here you would see someone bringing the claim described as the petitioner. And the person or organisation on the other side, or the counterparty, is usually obvious from the context. It might be the state as a whole, so it might be the United Kingdom, or it might be a ministry or a government department. There's one final pattern that I ought to mention to you, and that's a kind of disguised version of the first and second patterns. Because in some cases, the real appellant or the real plaintiff, it doesn't appear in quite the same way. Because in criminal cases and administrative cases, the Crown plays a role. So when I gave you that UK Supreme Court title page for the Heathrow decision, it appeared in this way. So we had Friends of the Earth, but we don't see Friends of the Earth coming first, we see R up front, and then Friends of the Earth feature in brackets. R here stands for the Crown. So if you're reading out the name of the case, you wouldn't say R on the application of, you'd say the Crown on the application of Friends of the Earth. That's just the way it's done in the UK and a number of other jurisdictions, because there's a belief that the Crown has an interest in smooth administration, and so people or organisations don't directly initiate administrative review, the Crown does so on their behalf. Final thing I would mention is that there may be other types of parties involved who are not in this kind of antagonistic relationship, whether that's plaintiff, respondent, appellant, respondent. So you might also see references to interested parties, people directly affected by the case, and also third-party interveners, or amici curiae, which are essentially the same thing. It's just that third-party interveners is the language preferred in the UK, and amici curiae, or sometimes amici curiae, is the term preferred in the United States. Amici curiae just means friends of the court, because they're supposed to be helping the court reach its decision. So if you go back to that case about the puberty blockers, you'll see that we do have claimants and defendants, but we also have NHS England involved as an interested party, and a number of other interveners who are involved in some way or have some interests that are indirectly affected by the case. Presumably NHS trusts, which are also dispensing similar treatments, or public interest groups who are appearing because they want to argue for a particular outcome. I've spent a bit of time going through how to identify the parties involved in a legal decision and describing their different roles. And I've done that because ultimately you're going to be reading these court decisions in a political key, and when we're reading court decisions in a political key, we often want to know about winners and losers. And often one party is going to win and the other party is going to lose. So before we can find out who won, we need to know how were they involved in the case. But some of those things about identifying exactly who won will be discussed in the next video.